Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of my tutorial video channel. This is part 4 of interaction between demand and supply and determination of equilibrium price and quantity in the market. In part 1 of interaction between demand and supply and how they determine the equilibrium price, I have discussed different situations, and in part 2 I have drawn certain diagrams to show how the interactions take place and how they influence the equilibrium price and quantity in the market. And in part 3 and 4 I have discussed certain scenarios, and as I promised earlier that I would discuss 10 scenarios where demand and supply interaction in different ways would impact the market equilibrium price and quantity. So in this episode I will show one unique thing. Several years back during war, a commander of a unit of US Army noticed that the soldiers are drinking too much of bootleg whiskey, whereas whiskey is available at a bar but at a higher price. So soldiers were getting whiskey at a cheaper rate at non-descript bootleg whiskey outlets, and they were falling sick again and again. So this thing was a big concern for the commander, and then the commander thought that if he could impose a price ceiling on the bars, that is, whiskey cannot be sold above that price, then soldiers would drink whiskey from bar, so lesser and lesser numbers of soldiers will fall sick if they at all drink bootleg whiskey. But in reality this did not happen. What happened and why that happened, I am explaining here. Please look at the whiteboard. So there are two markets. One is whiskey at bar and the other is bootleg whiskey at nondescript outlets. Now, as I have said earlier, whenever you are going to discuss the interaction between demand and supply and how they determine the equilibrium price and quantity in the market, please start from equilibrium. That is, assume that the market is in equilibrium. And secondly, you must think which side of the market is being affected by the change. So I shall draw two diagrams, one to show the equilibrium in the market on excessive measure quantity and on excessive measure price. I am drawing two diagrams, one for the market of whiskey at bar and the other is a market of bootleg whiskey at nondescript outlets. On excessive measure quantity and on excessive measure price. Now whiskey at bar market, this is demand curve, D sub 0 is the demand curve and S sub 0 is the supply curve. They intersect say at point M. So P sub 0 and Q sub 0 are the equilibrium price and quantity respectively. Now in the bootleg whiskey market, let D sub 0 and S sub 0 be the demand curve and supply curve respectively, and P sub 0 and Q sub 0 are equilibrium price and quantity respectively. You can see from here that the price in the pure whiskey market, that is whiskey that is available at bar, is much greater much bigger than the price of bootleg whiskey. Now the commandant is imposing a price ceiling. He dictates that the bars cannot sell whiskey beyond this price. Say this is P sub C. Now at P sub C price, you see the suppliers, that is the bar owners, are ready to supply this much of whiskey, whereas the demand is Q sub D. That is, suppliers are ready to supply Q sub S quantity of whiskey, but the demand from the soldiers is Q sub D. So there is a gap between demand and supply. Demand is much bigger than supply. Now the commander thought that as the price of whiskey has been lowered, so soldiers will go to the bars and drink whiskey there, so they will not fall sick. Now actually what happened? Since there is a price ceiling, that is, bars are not allowed to sell whiskey at a price bigger than P sub C. As I have discussed in earlier videos, a black market price started to prevail. Say this is P sub B. Correct? Because the sellers of whiskey, that is the bar owners, are not ready to satisfy the demand at this price. That is the price fixed by the commander. So a black market price started to prevail in the market, which is P sub B. Correct? Now, since supply is much lower relative to demand, and a black market price started to prevail, more and more soldiers opted for the bootleg whiskey. As a result, demand for bootleg whiskey increased, and let D sub 1 becomes the new demand curve. That is, the demand curve is shifting rightward parallelly from D sub 0 to D sub 1. Why this happened? This happened because in the pure whiskey market, there is a black market price that was prevailing in the market, and sellers were not ready to sell at P sub C price. So demand was much greater than supply, so more and more soldiers opted for the bootleg whiskey. So the demand curve for bootleg whiskey shifted rightward parallelly from D sub 0 to D sub 1. Now you see D sub 1 and S sub 0, that is the original supply curve. There is no change in supply curve because the imposition of price in the pure whiskey market has not impacted the supply side of bootleg whiskey market. So the supply curve will remain at S sub 0. So S sub 0 and D sub 1 intersect, say at point N. Say this be point E, original equilibrium point. And D sub 1 and S sub 0 intersect at point N. Now you see equilibrium price has increased from P sub 0 to say P sub 1, and equilibrium quantity has increased from Q sub 0 to Q sub 1. That means demand has increased as well as price has increased, but still the price is lower than the black market price. Correct? So here price increases and quantity demanded also increases. This is the impact on the bootleg whiskey market.
And ultimately what happened? More and more soldiers opted for bootleg whiskey because that is available in the market, whereas whiskey which they are able to afford, the price they are able to afford, does not prevail in the pure whiskey market because a black market price started to prevail in the market. So more and more soldiers opted for bootleg whiskey, and more soldiers fell sick. So what the commander thought, actually the reverse happened. This is the beauty of economics. The commander learned a lesson that the strategy of war does not apply in economics. Correct? So this is all about this video. I believe this is well understood by you. Still, should you have any doubt in your mind, if you think any point needs further clarification or explanation, please feel comfortable to let me know through the comment section. I shall be more than glad to respond to all your queries. And if you think the video has benefited you, it is useful to you, please do share the video with your friends, brothers, sisters and colleagues. And finally, thank you very much for watching this video. Stay well and goodbye.